Echo, why don't you name me some horror writers? Anybody who's written spooky, scary, big names, small names.
All right, so probably Stephen King, Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, and let's see. Who else? Who else do I can't think of a fourth one.
Bram Stoker.
Yes,
Stein.
Yeah, I haven't really read any Goosebumps just because whenever I was a kid, I used to get really bad nightmares all the time. And so my mom said, no Goosebumps. And I was like, okay, whatever.
I will say this, and anybody can fight me, but Goosebumps was not his best book series. His best book series, in fact, was the Fear Street book series, which were made kind of under the same weird, twisted, like twist ending principles that Goosebumps had, but they were matured for a slightly older audience, where everything happened on this street. I don't know if you've read any of those, or if anybody out there has read any of those. We're probably all adults now, but I tell you what, a lot of them still hold. And I promise you will not be disappointed. I noticed you didn't bring up the Brothers Grimm in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, because I haven't really read personally big old collection of their stories. I know that there are a lot that they have written, but I don't think of them because I haven't read a lot of them personally.
So we're not talking about the Brothers Grimm, Echo. We are actually going to go in a different route, and for something completely off to the side that I don't think anybody would think of if given that topic to start naming people off of. But we're going to talk about good old Mother Goose. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
I'm really shocked.
Nursery rhymes freak me out.
And there's a good reason. A lot of nursery rhymes, like a lot of old fairy tales, were written in a way that they didn't come out and say completely what people were trying to say with them.
Yeah.
People back then used them in a way to convey stories with hidden messages.
All right.
I researched a lot into it. I picked some of the better ones. I have my favorite one saved for the end because it's the most, I think, the most turn of a twist, I guess.
All right.
But I don't think we said it at the beginning that I'm Scarlett.
And I'm Echo.
And we're about ready to have some really unforgettable conversations. So, nursery rhymes were originally to, convey stories generations. So a lot of these, when you look at them, you'll hear, oh, it's like folklore behind it, that they can't prove that that's really what it's about. Some of them, if you really look at the facts, it makes a lot of sense when you're talking about it. So we're going to talk about one that I always forget about until I think about the movie Shrek. But we're going to start with the three blind. I know that's an off-brand thing for me to say. We're going to talk about the three blind mice first.
Yes. I do know that one. The babies enjoy that one at daycare.
So we're going to start with Miss Queen Mary the First.
All right.
Do you remember her nickname?
I believe she was the one known as Bloody Mary, correctly?
Oh, yes. The three blind mice are supposedly Oxford martyrs. They were three Anglican bishops who refused to renounce their Protestant beliefs. So, Queen Mary I, her father wanted to divorce his wife. And the Catholic priests wouldn't sign off on it.
Yeah, because divorce is a big no-no in Catholicism.
So then her father created this big Protestant movement.
Okay.
Well, when she took reign, she wanted to convert back to the Catholic Church. The whole country back to Catholic. So, when these bishops refused to renounce their Protestant beliefs, Mary did what she was known for best and had them executed.
Yep.
For blindly following the Protestant learnings rather than the Catholic ones that she wanted everyone to believe in.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Therefore, we have our 3 blind mice that stand in for the bishops being butchered by Queen Mary. And she actually turned out to be a common denominator in a couple of these, believe it or not.
Okay.
So,
well, I mean, she was pretty prolific.
To stay true to that, we're going to go ahead and go right into another one that has to do with her. Do you want to guess the name of it?
It has been a long time since my Mother Goose days.
So we have...
I'm having a struggle.
Like me with all those words before, if the 3 blind mice make it in here, I'm going to be astonished. I apologize to everybody listening to this. I, Scarlett, have dyslexia and have problems reading the language I have read my whole life, even though I am 26 years old. But I promise I research and read a lot of things. So some podcasts will be better than others because my English some days works and my English other days doesn't.
Happens, bruh.
We're going to go into Mary, Mary, quite contrary.
Aha! Okay. That makes sense.
Do you know this rhyme off the top of your head?
I do. Do I need to say it for us?
I think you should.
All right. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row.
So, there's a couple different ones behind this. So, of course, as we said earlier, the Mary is referring to Mary Tudor, also known as Bloody Mary. And in an attempt to break away from the Church of England, she tried to revert back to
Catholicism, correct?
Exactly. She wanted to convert back to the Catholic Church as soon as she became queen. She's like, I am queen. This is what I say. So a lot of people, though, didn't like this, obviously. So it caused problems. So obviously it is known and said that she would pursue and murder many Protestants.
Okay. And use them to fertilize her garden, I assume?
Not exactly. But I like that's where your brain went. Let's go secret window on this and put a garden over all these dead bodies. But no. So the lighter interpretation, which is what we're going to do first, because we're all about the dark and spooky here. So we'll do the light stuff first, and then we'll get to like the real scary stuff that lay underneath. Some people believed that the silver bells were meant to represent the Catholic Church because of the church bells, and that the cockle shells stood for the pilgrimage to Spain, and that the pretty maidens all in a row were the nuns of the church.
Okay.
How wholesome is that?
I guess.
You guess.
I guess if you're Catholic.
But let's dive into the darker stuff because that's what we're all here for. We're all here for the spooky that I find on the internet. So, even darker meaning behind all of this, we'll kind of go almost line by line through this. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
So, how does your gardens grow? So, this is referred to the cemeteries because in her time of reign, the cemeteries would grow because she was pursuing and murdering Protestants, and a lot of people died during her reign.
That makes sense.
So the more people she would kill, or the more people that were killed for their beliefs,
the more headstones would pop up.
Exactly. Very morbid flowers.
Yes, a corpse garden, if you would.
So, do you want to guess what the silver bells stood for?
I'm assuming, since we're talking about Bloody Mary and how she used to get people executed, I would assume that the silver bells would be the bells that tolled at the executions?
Actually, no, but that was a really good guess, and that was a little bit lighter of an answer than you're gonna get. So,
Oh no.
silver bells actually stood for thumb screws, which are a torture device.
Ouch.
Yeah, don't like that, do ya? And
Yep. Your thumbs. And they just leave them there.
mm-hmm. And then cockle shells are another type of torture device that I really was like, I looked into it and then I was like, nope,
Do
we're
they
not.
go on the testicles? Do they go on the testicles?
They go in the lower region, yeah.
Ugh.
And then the pretty maidens that stood all in a row had two different meanings.
Ah.
The first time that I was reading about it, it just mentioned that the pretty maidens all in a row were the line of guillotines that they had set up.
Okay.
And then the second time, they expanded on that a little bit and said that the pretty maidens in a row stood for all the people that were in line to be executed by the guillotines.
Okay. I was also wondering if it meant putting people in the Iron Maiden.
You know what? No, but that would have been a really interesting thing if it was.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, that would be uncomfortable and it would be even more prolonged than actually just guillotining somebody.
Exactly. Now, after reading a bunch of these, I don't want anybody to complain to me if I in the future have children and decide that the proper thing to read them is the Deathly Hollows, like the story of the three Deathly Hollows. That
Yeah.
has nothing to touch
Yeah,
on
I
how
don't.
messed up these are.
I said I don't want to hear anybody complaining about reading that as compared to any of the nursery rhymes.
Oh
Not
no.
that, I mean, whenever you think of most of the like lullabies that you sing to children, like Rockabye Baby, that one's pretty dark.
That one's pretty
And
dark on its
Ring
own.
Around the Rosie is pretty dark when you get into it. Yeah, whenever you get into it.
Funny you mention
But
Ring Around the Rosie because that's going to be our big end point before we have our little tangent of
oh,
talk. Yeah.
okay.
Now, Echo, you know me better than anyone. We've been friends forever. What is my favorite place? You should get this
Ireland.
right. Oh, yes. I love Ireland, let me tell you. So it's kind of upsetting that the next one that we're going to talk about has to do with stuff that happened after the potato famine.
Oh,
I know. So this is actually where the this old man comes
this
from.
old man, he played one. He played knick-knack on my thumb. That one.
Yes.
All right.
You want to finish that one though?
With a knick-knack paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home.
So, of course, like the last one, we're going to kind of almost go line through line with this one because there's a lot to do with each line almost having its own meaning. In England, it referred to the influx of Irish beggars going door to door after the famine. So, these beggars would try to sell knickknacks.
All right.
Or would literally play rhymes called knickknacks using spoons.
Okay.
In hopes of getting some sort of change or money from the person that they were singing these to. So then, he played knick-knack on my thumb. So he played the spoons on this person's thumb or on the shoe because the rhyme goes on and on like most of these.
Oh, yeah.
Goes
all the way to 10.
Exactly. So do you want to guess what paddywhack means?
Is it playing the spoons?
No. It's actually a derogatory term.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to guess?
I know that they used to refer to the Irish as patties, and I don't know what the whack would be.
You know what a paddy wagon is, right?
Yes.
Okay, you want to explain about that one?
Okay, so a paddy wagon is like a police wagon. Like it's where they pick up prisoners.
But anyway, a paddywhack.
Mm-hmm.
So a knick-knack paddywhack. A Paddywhack is a derogatory term for literally hitting an Irish person.
That's rude.
Your face.
Why am I singing this to the babies at daycare?
Yeah, you're probably never going to sing this song again. You're like, we're not singing that one. I love Ireland and everything it stands for.
Yes, we're done. We're done with this old man. And I think for our counting songs, we might just stick with the ants go marching.
I really wish the viewers at home, the listeners, whatever we want to call them, I wish they could have seen your face when I told you what that meant. Because it just looked like somebody ruined your day. It looked like you were physically crushed. Like everything you stood for was just smacked. Somebody walked up and yeeted your ice cream cone.
A bad case of sour grapes on my face.
I mean, I guess that's a little bit better than resting bitch face, but you know.
I don't know. I think I'd prefer to have resting bitch face to resting sour grapes face.
So then we come to the last line before we get too off topic. And this old man came rolling home. Do you want to guess what that allures to?
As this is getting darker and darker, I am wondering if it has something to do with, I don't know, dead bodies.
No.
You put a dead body on a wagon.
No. This one doesn't
roll them home.
Yeah, this one doesn't get as dark as the others. This one's it's still not right to call anybody a derogatory term by any means, but
no.
This old man came rolling home seems to allure to them using the money that they've collected, playing the spoons and seeing these knickknacks and selling knickknacks, them using the money to get drunk, to booze it up at the end of the day. And so they went rolling on home after they...
And then you have to roll them home because they're too wasted.
So
okay.
Yeah, so there's that one. Do you want to guess the next one that I have written down? Tato says that he's got a guess.
Yeah, did you hear him?
Yeah, I heard him, so he's probably on the recording.
Well, I locked him out of the basement because I didn't need him coming up and munching on our microphone while we were trying to work. How many more till we're at the Ring Around the Rosie? But I guess it doesn't really matter.
I think 3 or 4. So you've got a little bit.
So I've got a lot to guess through. I don't know. One of my favorite ones was the old woman that lived in the shoe.
No, but I can tell you a little bit about that one. I didn't write it down. I didn't write it down because there wasn't much about it other than it had 2 different origins, I guess you could say, or folklore about it. The first one, obviously, because, do you remember the old woman that lived in a shoe?
I believe so. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. And after that,
So the last line goes something like, she would whip them all, then put them to bed.
Yeah.
So basically, there's the obvious one that back in those days, people had so many children.
Again, Catholic. They didn't believe in contraception. So that's why they had so many kids.
Exactly. So back then, if the children were misbehaving, it wasn't right, but they would whip them or they would go to bed without dinner. That was the broad overterm for what I found for a lot of that. But then the other meaning behind it, which I found a little more interesting, was that the old lady was actually referring to England or Britain.
Okay.
I mean, it's the same thing. That
definitely makes it more interesting.
Yeah. I know that's the same place, but I know over history it's been called a couple different things. That's why I said it that way. She had so many children she didn't know what to do. They ruled over so many territories.
Yeah, all of their colonies.
They didn't know what to do, so things got out of control. Yeah. So that was definitely the more interesting one.
Yeah, that definitely makes it much more interesting.
I think we should note at this point that you guys can hear her cat, Tato. So it's
Yeah, he's really upset that he can't come be with me right now. And I think he's gonna be fine.
so
He's got food upstairs, he's got water upstairs, he's got litter box upstairs. He's good. He
yeah,
just misses his mom.
I just wanted to make sure people knew it was your cat that was locked out of the room and not a person. It's a cat. It's her loving cat, but he's
Yes.
being really loud, and it's cute that he wants in so bad. But the
But
next,
he'll crunch on the microphone.
I know he will, and then we won't have good sound. So we have to just take it for what it is. I can't let my cats in the recording room. She can't have her cats in the recording room. But you know what? We can go play with them when we're done.
That's true.
So the next one I have is Jack and Jill.
Okay, yeah. I do know that one.
So
That's also hanging on the wall in the daycare.
So the one that I found the most interesting, the theory I found the most interesting, is that the poem actually depicts the political downfall and public execution of Francis Louis the 16th
Okay.
and his wife Marie Antoinette.
All right.
Now you know who I'm talking about. I saw it in your face. You were like, that name sounds familiar.
I'm like, okay, who's Louis? and then I'm like, oh.
So they were convicted of treason during the French Revolution.
Yes.
Louis the 16th was beheaded, so he lost his crown.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Jill came tumbling after.
Exactly. The line one of the articles I read used was, and like Jill, Marie Antoinette, her head came tumbling after. I was like, ooh, that's a bit morbid. That's just a tiny bit morbid. But like in the rhyme, Marie Antoinette was beheaded shortly after her husband.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable explanation to that rhyme.
Mm-hmm. Losing his crown, tumbling down the hill. It made sense in a way for the rhyme.
Yeah.
So, do you know what they're supposed to say when the queen dies?
Is it God save the queen?
No. So, there's this thing, and I've read about it on the internet, where when a royal family member dies, that before the press knows, everybody in the house needs to know and things like that. So, each one has a security term that they will say over the microphones. So, what I've read at least is that when the queen dies, her code phrase is London Bridge has fallen.
Okay.
Interesting, right? It's a good segue into our next one. That's why I brought it up.
It is.
So we're going to talk about London Bridge is falling down.
We do enjoy that one. We do enjoy that one at daycare as well.
Well, it's got two different ones. So the first one I noted, and of course, neither one of these, there's no evidence. Some people say some of this stuff did happen. Some people say that it didn't. The first part that some people say is that the poem is about King Olaf II of Norway.
Okay.
Who was
heard of him.
He was a Viking invader.
Okay.
And apparently they invaded in the 10th century and destroyed what was London Bridge at the time. So, easy explanation, right? Like cut and dry.
Yep.
Not the next part. It never is when you let me have a part 2, because part 2 is probably more morbid than part 1. Let's be honest.
Yes.
So, the other much darker origin tale, folklore, I should say, because before I get into this one, I want to note that there is no archaeological evidence to back this one up, but a lot of people say it, and then when I get to the end and explain the little bit of other reasoning that people think this is a thing, it comes to a pretty morbid circle. So keep that in mind.
Looking forward to this.
So the most disturbing believed folklore about the London Bridge is that the song is actually about human sacrifice.
Interesting. I never would have thought that it would go there.
Do you know what Imure means?
I do not.
I-M-M-U-R-E. No clue?
Nope.
You want I should tell you?
Well, yeah, I think that would make for a better podcast.
So it means to enclose or confine someone against their will.
Okay.
So do you want to guess what that has to do with the nursery rhyme and why I brought it up?
Well, I know they're always talking about building the bridge back up with this, that, and the other.
Okay, so the actual word that they used was immurement, which is the act of closing somebody into something until they starve.
Okay, so
Okay.
like in, is it the cask of Amontillado, where they do that?
I'm not sure.
It's Edgar Allan Poe.
I know it's one of them, but you're.
Yeah. I'm just like, so it's that.
To ask me while I do not have my books in front of me is like the wrong time to ask me. But
Yes.
so many people believed that the bridge would collapse unless there was a human sacrifice. And basically, people believe the song is about trapping someone, like building up and putting somebody into part of the foundation
Okay.
alive in like
All
a
right.
small room, boarded up area until they eventually died
Yeah.
as a human sacrifice
Yeah.
so that the bridge structure would stay standing and wouldn't fall. Well, it seems a bit out there, right? Like the way of thinking of this.
I mean, yeah, it does seem a little bit outrageous, but like with all the new technology, I'm sure they could prove if it was true or not.
Yeah, that's why I said there is no archaeological evidence. But that doesn't mean people back then didn't believe it happened, for
Oh yeah.
one.
I'm
And
I'm sure they did believe it.
and for two, have you ever played the London Bridge game at school? Did
Yes.
you play that one?
Yes.
Okay.
We played
So
that one a lot, especially in Mr. Moman's music class.
so of course you have two kids standing there forming an arch
Mm-hmm.
with their hands.
And trap.
Yep, while kids are running underneath singing the song. And then of course when it gets to the last line, the arms fall,
Mm-hmm.
trapping someone into the arch.
All right. You've got me sold on it. I
I've got
believe you.
this is what happens when I have hours and hours to research stuff. I can just convince you. No, I'm kidding. I can't convince you of everything, but I can almost always convince you that there's something weird going on.
Oh yeah.
One of these days, I'll
And I mean,
convince you the Earth is
it's
flat.
it's not.
I'm kidding.
No.
I'm kidding. I don't believe that.
There's no convincing me. There's no convincing me. Uh, but I was gonna say it's not unheard of for like during construction projects, like especially big construction projects, and especially back whenever there weren't as high safety standards. It it was known that sometimes a worker might fall into like the big old cement vat, like for like building a dam, like somebody could fall in that and
They would just keep going. That's how it was back
yep,
then. They would just keep going.
yep. I believe it was the same with building the Great Wall.
Possibly.
Like even if it wasn't that somebody just fell in, it would be like the workers were working so hard that they died on the job and they just kept building over them. But like it, it's not that unheard of for somebody to be buried inside a big structural project.
It's not. And there are a lot of beliefs from back in that time period that wouldn't make sense today. And I'm sure at some point we'll get into that. I find weird, morbid history kind of fascinating because
Yeah,
it's not talked about a lot. I mean, you can look it up online. Like, it was very easy to type in
yeah,
dark origins of nursery rhymes and get to read about all these things that could have possibly inspired these nursery rhymes, but you get very minimal information unless you type in each one and you read like 1,000 articles, because
yeah.
most of the time when you see this stuff online, and I've learned this researching for the podcast, and I'm sure Echo's going to learn this sooner or later,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
when she's doing
If
her
I
research.
if I deep dive into something medieval.
When you first start, you'll come across a lot of articles that are 10 scariest nursery rhymes, 10 darkest whatever, 27 darkest movies or books or songs about death or whatever you're looking
Yeah.
up. and you're going to get like a tiny little blurb. And from that, you have to come up with enough key phrases and key words to be able to type it in on Google and get what you're looking for.
Yeah.
We're doing a little bit of the work for you because I read probably close to at least 10 to 20 different articles. And it was getting kind of hard because I would get on one site and they would have one in-depth article about one nursery rhyme, but they'd only have that one. And then I would have to change websites. And I got really good about learning keywords for this one, but I'm sure we're going to learn that the darker we want to go with it and the more niche stuff that we get into, it's going to be harder to look it up. For the next one, I've only got one little fact about it, and it seems to be the actual origin of it, but we're going to talk about, here we go around the mulberry bush.
Okay.
So, according to historian, you're bobbing your head, you're singing it in your head. I know you are.
I am. The kids like that one a lot too. They like to sit on my knees and like me to bounce them while we sing.
I find it funny that this is what we choose to do with our time. I used to be a daycare teacher, and you still are a daycare teacher.
Yep.
So here we go around the mulberry bush. According to historian R.S. Duncan, a former governor of New England's Wakefield prison, the song originated within the institution, where the female prisoners were to exercise out in the yard around, guess what? A mulberry tree.
Okay.
He said that they used to they would sing it as they exercised outside.
Okay.
That one's not dark and spooky like the others, but I found it an interesting historical fact. So
yeah,
I deemed it worthy to stay.
Fair enough. It is definitely an interesting little snippet of fact about it.
It is. So then we're gonna get into the big one, the one that you were waiting on so much. Yes, Ring Around the Rosie.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny because when you look it up, it's Ring Around a Rosie, and then you've got Ring Around the Rosie, and you have Ring Around Oh Rosie. So it's got a couple different titles, and apparently throughout the years, the lyrics differ a little bit between.
Yeah, I'm sure it's also a regional thing.
I'm sure, because you have. Do you want to go ahead and tell us this one, Echo?
Yeah. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
So, in some variations, instead of ashes to ashes, they say achoo, like sneezing.
Achoo.
Not that aggressive. So, surprisingly or not, this song isn't about frolicking around a rose bush. No. It's about the bubonic plague.
Yes. I absolutely love reading about the Black Plague.
I was going to say, I hope you say reading or learning about. I hope you just don't go straight into that saying, I love the bubonic plague.
I love the plague.
That would earn you a good old finger wag, let me tell you.
Yes.
So,
shame on you. Shame on you for enjoying death and suffering.
Well, there goes our whole brand just out the window. Goodbye. But on a more serious note, this plague killed about 75 to 200 million people in the mid 1300s. Like a bunch of the ones before, you kind of have to go line by line to really understand this one. So we'll start with the Ring Around the Rosie. So this line came about because one of the first signs of the plague that a person had it was they would get an O-shaped rash that was red or purplish that would appear on their skin.
I always heard that it was like a boil, like a red boil with like a black ring around it.
A lot of this research came specifically from typing in, the name of the nursery rhyme, and it just had kind of vague information about the plague.
Yeah.
Believe me, if I know Echo, we will probably have a whole almost 2-hour podcast on the bubonic plague at some point.
I mean, if you want it, I will get it for you. Not the plague, the research.
Yeah, please don't get the plague because we need you. We need you for this podcast. So then we get to the line, a pocket full of posies. There's a couple different reasons that this could be a line, technically. So people that had the plague would fill their pockets full of sweet smelling flowers, sweet items, anything they could to cover up the stench of death.
Even if they didn't have the plague, like anybody walking around would want to fill their pockets with something to mask the stench.
Well, and the other reason that's the next thing I was going to bring up. The other reason people would do that if they didn't have the plague was back then it was believed that the illness spread through bad smells.
Yeah.
So people would fill their pockets full of these things because they were afraid to get it.
Yeah.
And then we come to the line ashes to ashes. So
yeah, or as I always heard it, just ashes, ashes. Not just ashes to ashes, just ashes and ashes.
I've heard it both ways. Again,
Yeah.
I should say me and Echo are from the same town, but I technically live in the farming,
more rural area, yes.
and Echo,
and I'm a little bit closer to like the city.
Yeah, she grew up in town, so
just a little bit closer.
Sometimes you'll hear me say things, and I'm sure Echo will repeat them because I grew up saying things in a way that sometimes you can't understand what I'm saying. I promise to try to keep that to a minimum, but when we were in school,
if it happens, I'm sure we'll try to explain it.
Yeah, we'll explain it, I'm sure. I wrote ashes to ashes because that's how I had always sung it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I sung the song. Ashes, ashes is another way I've heard it. But basically, those who would die of the plague were cremated.
Yeah.
So that's where that
burn
line
the bodies,
comes from.
stop the spread.
Now, the other version that we didn't sing around here, where they make the achoo achoo noise, some sort of sneezing noise, that would be in reference to another early sign of having the plague was sneezing. So,
which sucks because allergies.
Yeah, sneezing is one of those things. It's kind of like coughing. If you have any sort of allergies, it's an all the time thing anyway.
I just am having like a sudden like existential breakdown. My brain was all like, I have allergies. What if I lived back then when there wasn't any allergy medicine? Just imagine how miserable everybody without allergy medicine feels. Oh my god.
I saw you going into this mode and I'm just all like, did saying the word cough bring up some weird meltdown for you? Because if so, we need to talk about
allergies. You just said allergies. And I was like, they didn't have allergy medicine in the 1300s.
You'd be miserable.
I would be. Not only would I be dying of the plague, I'd have allergies and no way to cure them.
You know, gotta watch out for them fleas on rats.
I'm not singing it. I am not singing it. All you need to know is go to YouTube and look up Fleas on Rats. It's on a YouTube channel from history teachers, and they do a song to Hollow Batgirl about the plague. Get on YouTube, look up Fleas on Rats. You regret it.
So then we get to the line, we all fall down.
Yes.
So, of course, this refers to and notes to the fact that almost everyone who would get the plague would die.
Yes.
So, you know, we all fall down.
Luckily, we now have a cure for the bubonic plague.
Yeah.
Not that it's a very prevalent disease in this day and age. Although they did say that there was a squirrel found this year that had the bubonic plague. Just say.
Fleas on squirrels, they're going to have to change the song.
Uh-huh.
So, I had been in a discussion the other day that actually led to this becoming our topic for this episode, where the people I were talking to brought up this song and how it was about the plague. And then they said, well, what song do you think they're going to eventually years from now sing about COVID? because when you sing Ring Around the Rosie, you can all hold hands and you spin in a circle, then you all fall down. And I said, well, whatever they come up with, they can't touch and they have to stand 6 feet apart.
Be a very boring dance, too.
So,
gosh.
Back to Ring Around the Rosie. It was really puzzling, however, to note that the rhyme dates back to the early 1880s, even though the bubonic plague happened 530 years before that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's some big trauma, though.
The London plague happened 215 years before that. So, because they were like, well, maybe it's about the other one. The interesting thing to note is that it doesn't mean that the rhyme isn't about the plague or that it wasn't written back then. It could have been written after the plague, but still had been inspired by the plague. But it could also have been written much earlier, but then not considered appropriate because of what was going on during the time period. So it could have just gone dormant until the 1800s when, by that point, we remember what has happened, but it's not as traumatic and such. So it could have just resurfaced after all.
I'm also wondering if it could have been an oral tradition, like you would just like tell it from generation to generation until somebody finally wrote it down.
It could have been. That could be another good reason why it wasn't reported until the early 1880s. That was a good thing to note, I guess, that I had also found out. So it's really interesting how a lot of these have dark history tied to them. I don't know how many of these I'm going to keep around or will say in the future. I mean, it is part of history, and some of them, there were even more that I found that were less well known.
Yeah.
And I didn't bother to write those ones down or take notes on those because, yes, they are part of it, but if I hardly know them and I'm 26 years old.
Yeah, how many of the younger generations are going to know those?
Well, how many? And then also, how many people my age? Because I think the main reason I knew a bunch of these was because my mother was a preschool teacher and I did go to preschool. So I was taught them from a very young age.
Yeah.
So that could be part of it too.
I was raised by a bunch of like way older people.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the longest time, when it, like before first grade, before kindergarten, before preschool, the only people that I had to hang out with were my grandparents and my great aunts. Like those were the only people I hung out with besides my parents. And like my 2 older sisters, they were always at their mom's house or dad's house. So like I just hung out with vastly older people. So like maybe I heard more of those like old nursery rhymes than even some of the people in my class did.
Well, and a lot of them were more openly dark, I feel like. So that could have also been, it could have been more of that's the meaning behind it. And so then now it's like a we don't say that anymore kind of ordeal.
Yeah.
Because times are always changing. And that's something that I think some people don't realize is something that was said 10 years ago had a different effect back then than it would now.
Yeah.
Which is a big topic since we've all been in quarantine for so long.
Oh, yes.
So, did you find that interesting? Did you learn anything?
I learned quite a few things. There were a lot of things I knew, especially about the Ring Around the Rosie, because, I'm obsessed with the bubonic plague.
Mm-hmm. I know.
So I knew a lot of that already, but it was still really cool to get to talk about it. It was definitely interesting to learn about the 2 nursery rhymes associated with Bloody Mary. All around, good time. I hope you guys had fun.
I'm really excited about next week because I'm handing the more storytelling portion off to you, and I get to be the commentator.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully, I'll do a good job. Hopefully, I won't be too nervous.
I'm sure that you're going to do fine. Do you want to talk for a quick second before we end it about some of the other things we plan on talking about here, because I don't think we touched on that in the pilot episode. And I thought maybe we should throw out there that the nursery rhymes and the paranormal games aren't the only things we're planning about talking about, that we have like
Oh yeah.
a wide range of things, because we basically like all things weird and spooky and abnormal. So we're gonna touch on the paranormal. We're gonna touch some on aliens. We are gonna touch some on probably true crime, not probably a ton, but we will do some cases, I'm sure.
Yeah. There are some cases that are just too fascinating to not talk about. We probably won't talk about like super popular ones. Like we probably won't go over like the main serial killers that everybody knows. But
I,
like there's always a chance.
I feel
Also,
like,
I think I hear your cat, Scarlett.
yes, that is Rumple. He is not happy I have the door
Okay.
closed.
Yeah, I thought maybe I heard him. So we've got both of our cats on audio.
Um,
I think it's fine.
we're also going to talk about some, creatures that are out there.
Yeah, definitely talk about some cryptids.
Well,
Love a good cryptid.
that may or may not be out there, I guess is how we should word that. I will probably at some point dive into skinwalkers, so that would be an interesting one to keep an eye out for. I can't promise when I'll do that, but that's my big one. Probably definitely come around to talking about some Stephen King, some Edgar Allan Poe maybe. We might try to work in like eventually doing a time where we're all like, okay, for this month we're going to talk about this specific thing. I think the first one that we've talked about doing a big month event on was haunted dolls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are tons of those.
Yeah.
Not to mention Robert the Doll, Annabelle. There are a few that I've heard about. I don't necessarily know a ton about them, but they are in the possession of Zach Bagans at his haunted museum in Las Vegas. Why did I blank on Las Vegas?
I don't know. I
But
think
yes, I might see if I can find anything else out about some more of his
mm-hmm. I
haunted dolls.
I think we were just going with an overall broad term for creepy doll month. So there might just be stories. We might do like 3 actual dolls, or one episode talking about a lot of dolls and 2 episodes on actual dolls, and then doing another like side episode about just creepy dolls that don't have like a specific background. That could be
Okay, so
interesting,
like, okay,
because that's going to be a big one, I think.
yeah, like that's definitely going to be one that we have to like collaborate on
Oh
instead of
yes.
just do our separate research.
Definitely going to talk about some weird, kind of dark history stuff. We're just kind of, you'll notice with us, we're a bit all over the place. We managed to keep it together though, pretty well.
Sometimes barely.
Sometimes barely.
Usually we're hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, I'm kind of liking this, starting the podcast out with asking you a question, regardless of if it pertains to the topic or not.
Yeah.
It kind of is a nice little fun opening. So before we end it, I'm gonna, since we talked about maybe eventually getting into some personal stuff, I will ask you another question. You ready? If you could meet one person, and I'll answer this question too. If you could meet one person, anybody, famous, whatever, who would you meet?
I'm thinking either Tom Felton or Adam Driver.
Of course you are. I should have
just
known.
because I adore them.
So, because I want to go with somebody I feel like I could talk to, and like a lot of the people I watch on YouTube, I feel like I would just blank and it would just be like a normal fan reaction. I think if I could sit down and talk to anybody, it would be Tim Curry.
Oh, yes. I love him.
There's just so much stuff about him that's been popping up lately on TikTok. Just
I know you've sent me so
wonderful. He's such a sweet old man.
Yeah, I'm sure he was a sweet young man too.
Oh, I'm sure.
But now he's just so adorable. Oh my goodness, I want him to be my granddad. Now that I lack granddads, I need a new granddad.
But on that note, I'm Scarlett,
And I'm Echo.
and we hope that you come back, and we hope we entertained you with our strange
Weird.
and hopefully unforgettable conversations.
Bye bye.